All right, everyone, welcome back to East Texas Now. Now, as promised, we are talking to our Lane, Lucky. Lane, good morning.
Good morning to you. It's actually 7 hours ahead. It's evening time here in Berlin, Germany, where we will
Yes.
be spending the next week getting a closer look at the events that led up to and the 30 years since the Berlin Wall fell, really changing the landscape of not only Europe and democracy throughout Europe, but really had a major impact on the world, helping to bring to an end the Cold War.
Right, right. And so, how excited are you to be there, and what have you done so far? I do know that you just got there, so probably not too much just yet.
Yeah, it's always wonderful to be in Berlin. Just an amazing city. It has so much character, so much history, certainly some darker times. And that really has been one message that has carried through, obviously, through the atrocities of World War II, but then in the division and the years following World War II, in East versus West. And a city divided. Berlin was divided among the four superpowers, the four victorious superpowers at the end of World War II. Of course, you had the United States, France, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union. And each of those superpowers was responsible for being the administrator for a certain part of the city, a sector of the city. So, of course, Berlin is located in eastern Germany, and it was inside the German Democratic Republic, which we all know probably more commonly as East Germany. But within, there was, of course, a Western-style democracy in the three allied superpowers. And then you had, of course, the Soviets, who were allies in World War II, who kind of installed this more Soviet-style socialist republic, under the label of communism. So anyway, 30 years ago this week, the Berlin Wall came crumbling down. People moved across that wall, that barrier, that border for the first time in decades. And really, the world has never been the same. So this week, we're going to look closely at the events that led up to the division, how Germany became two separate countries for decades, and then how on November 9th, 1989, the first steps were taken toward a reunified Germany under one country, under one flag, and one of the closest allies of the United States. This week, we're going to hear from former U.S. Ambassador Robert Kimmitt, who was the first U.S. ambassador to Germany in 50 years. He was the first under the reunified Germany in the early 90s, from 91 to 93. And he says, of course, we're all used to hearing about this special relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom, but he believes the true special relationship is between the United States and Germany. Something like 20% of Americans trace their roots here to Germany. So it's very very important, very timely. And this week we're going to meet with folks who covered the fall of the wall and the events leading up to that. We're going to talk to everyday Germans to see how life has changed in the last 30 years. Are things better or worse since the wall has fallen and the two Germanys are unified as one country again? We're going to meet with the mayor of Berlin, and take part in some of the celebrations and festivities that are going on. We even have a meeting set up with Tom Brokaw, notable NBC Nightly News anchor, longtime journalist who happened to be here at that time, was one of the only American journalists here at the wall. And we have a private meeting with him to look back at his memories and what he remembers leading up to what eventually led to the fall of the wall. There's also some really big celebrations going on this week. On Saturday, on the day of the anniversary, there's a big outdoor concert and light show, fireworks. Think the 4th of July, but German style. There's also some really amazing art displays and public education murals that are out. People can walk through. You can take your cell phone and, using augmented reality, you've heard of this, AR, you can look through the camera on your phone and you'll be able to look at what's directly in front of you, and it will transpose what was there during the time of the divided Germany. So, for example,
cool.
yeah, being able to see where the wall was and what it looks like today using using that kind of virtual reality, which is really important. As we've seen with what happened during World War II, Germany has been very upfront and direct about making sure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated in the future. And as a country, and I think as a society here, they have put an emphasis on educating younger generations, people who may not have even been alive at the time, to make sure that they understand what life was like in an East versus West. And so it's also interesting to hear from some West Germans, former West Germans, who say that some of the stereotypes about East Germany were exaggerated to some degree. You know, this afternoon I was in a store right here in kind of the Tiergarten neighborhood where the hotel is, and one of the workers there was recalling what things were like, you know, in the late 80s. And he said that his father told him these stories of there not being enough food and, you know, people living in these really harsh conditions. And he said that simply, you know, was not accurate. You know, certainly East Germany was not a paradise, as it was often promoted by the socialist, the SED party. But then again, there wasn't, like, you know, widespread starvation, some of the rumors that maybe the West was propagating. That being said, it was a very oppressive regime. It was a totalitarian kind of dictatorship that was in place. The central government, you know, was notorious for spying on its citizens. Hundreds of thousands of people worked for the German secret police, the Stasi. There were husbands spying on wives and vice versa. Families spying on each other to see if there was anything happening to usurp the government, to undermine the East German government. We'll also this week get an up close look at the Berlin Wall, what remains of it. So, I'm looking here at my statistics. More than 95 miles of wall were erected. It encircled the city of Berlin and the surrounding areas. And today, very little of the wall still exists. There are a couple of different places, the Berlin Wall Memorial at Bernauer Strasse. There's also an exhibit kind of near Checkpoint Charlie, one of the big tourist areas, an American crossing in the American sector, where there's another stretch of the wall. And then there's the famous East Side Gallery, which is a portion of the wall where artists from around the world have been called in for the last couple of decades to turn this into a public art project, and very famous murals, you know, really kind of telling the story of what happened in this divided Germany, and also looking at you know, the benefits of being a unified people and having peace. Speaking of this whole movement was called the Peaceful Revolution. It was an uprising of the East Germans against their government, which forced reforms. So when Mikhail Gorbachev came into power in the Soviet Union in the mid-'80s, he responded to reforms that were needed in his own country, in the Soviet Union, and that started to kind of trickle down into some of the Eastern Bloc countries. And so then the East German government started to kind of grapple with this. What do we do? What reforms will our citizens require? And one of the central issues had to do with being able to cross the border between the East and the West, or into Czechoslovakia and into Hungary. And that eventually is what a blunder, which we'll go into more detail about what happened. Some erroneous information was accidentally released in a press conference, and that led to a flood of people gathering at the wall on November 9th. And that's eventually what caused people to be able to cross the border freely into West Germany. What really was amazing about all of this, just to kind of give you an illustration, East Germany had lost a sixth of its population by August 1961. And so the wall started going up in that same year. And so that was when they started erecting this barrier system, the Berlin Wall, to keep people from leaving East Germany. And that's what a lot of people, I think, sometimes get a little confused about. The Berlin Wall was not built to keep people from coming in. It was designed to keep them from leaving.
Right.
And there was a brain drain. There were, everyday citizens, and the best and the brightest from East Germany were fleeing this oppressive regime in the East German government.
You know what? I have friends from Germany, and they have just told me all kinds of stories about how their family was separated back during those times by the wall, and about how, their family members weren't able to see other family members, and, just how that affected the dynamic of their family. And now that it is down and you're out there exploring for the 30th anniversary, it really kind of puts in perspectives. And like you said, gives everybody, a new look on something that you learn about in school, but you may not understand completely, just the effect and the extent of what this wall did.
Yeah, and I know that you lived for some time here in Europe, and so the after effects of not only the wall being built and the division, but of course under reunification, that really it spread throughout Europe, and what happens in Europe affects us in the U.S.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I'm so glad that you are calling in, Lane, because like you said, I mean, I am living through you right now. I love learning about, the European history, because it's important. Like you said, it affects everyone, not just the immediate people that surround it. So I'm super excited to see what all you get a chance to do. All of the people that you mentioned that you get to talk to as well, because of course you're going to give that information back to us and we get a chance to get enlightened as well. And so I know that you, like you said, just got there. You're going to be talking to some people about, the Berlin Wall and how they feel about it. What are you personally looking most forward to? Is it talking to the people? Is it meeting some of the representatives, going to the wall? What is that?
I've been to the wall before, and it's always very moving, because sometimes folks forget that more than 200 people died trying to cross or trying to escape the wall, and countless others, of course, died either at the checkpoints or after the checkpoints. And so really the human impact here, it really did change people's lives, having this isolation and not being able to see their family members, like you talked about. This wall not only was a physical barrier, but it was psychological as well, and it was emotional. There were families who lived on different sides of Berlin, to different sides of town, and suddenly this wall separated them, and for decades they may not have seen each other. Relatives may have passed on during that time. And so this was a fight or flight kind of situation. And so it's been always very interesting to hear the individual accounts. But even though we're separated in the U.S. By thousands of miles, this is one of those moments where if you were alive at the time, you remember where you were when you heard that the wall came down and that people were crossing. This is one of those moments. It's a JFK assassination. It's a Challenger explosion. It's a 9/11. You remember exactly where you were when you got the news that the wall came down. And a lot of folks still find it very hard to believe that it's been 3 decades. And there's a lot of work to be done. Parts of the East are still lagging behind economically. Whenever the country was reunified, it wasn't just magically, all was well in this country. It is still taking time for cities and communities in the eastern part of the country for their economy to recover from this reunification. And again, Europe, what happens in Europe impacts us in the U.S. Germany is the largest economy in Europe. And so our economy is very closely tied to what happens abroad. And so the goal of all of this week, yes, is to bring this to you firsthand, but it's also to help you hopefully get a better understanding of what this means to you. Okay, so that's over there. That's Germany. Why do I care in East Texas?
Right.
And that's some of the questions that we're hoping to answer this week. And I've just really been amazed by some of the comments that have been posted on social media, on Facebook, in Twitter where people say, I was actually in the country at the time the wall fell, or I have relatives who were divided among East and West Germany. And so I think a lot of folks not only have a lot of memories about this, but have actual personal connections.
Lane, I'm so excited that you are there to bring us this. And like you said, how it would have or how it did affect us, because it's important for people to know, we all live on this planet, and there's nothing that one country can do that won't trickle down and affect the others in some way. So it's very important to tell this story. Thank you so much. I want you to go ahead, get some rest. And what is on the agenda tomorrow? Just remind everybody what you're going to be doing tomorrow and where you're going to be updating us from on East Texas Now.
So we will have another live report with you at some point tomorrow once we take a look closer at the schedule. We have a meeting with a journalist who covered, start to finish, not only the division, but the reunification and some of his perspectives. We're going to do these every day that we can. Certainly, the schedule may not permit every single day, but I don't see why we wouldn't be able to. But I do want to encourage everyone to go to KLTV.com or KTRE.com. At the nav bar at the top of our homepage, you can click the Community tab. You'll see another menu that says In Focus, and that will bring you all of the reports. And there's a lot of stuff that we just won't have time to talk about here on East Texas Now or even on our newscasts. We're going to do some live reports as well for Good Morning East Texas and later in the week on East Texas News Weekend. But you can go to our special In Focus section on KLTV.com and KTRE.com, and hopefully we can put a link to that on the East Texas Now Facebook and Twitter, so anybody watching can get to that. But that really, we've just got a jam-packed week really to try and get you up to speed on exactly what's happening here in Germany as we mark the 30th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and how the peaceful revolution changed history forever.
Loving it, Lane. Well, we definitely can't wait to talk to you and see more of your reports. Definitely let us know when we can give you a call back on East Texas Now, and we will do so.
Thanks a lot, Kayla. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yes, you will. Bye, Lane. All right, you guys, again, Lane Luckie from Germany.